right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are talking about The Royal Hotel, the new film from Kitty Green, starring Julia Garner and Jessica Henwick, as two women who take up a job in the middle of nowhere in Australia at a bar, and things get a little bit tense, let's just say. We have a fun conversation coming up, lots of great puzzle pieces to get into with Megan Kearns from Spoilerpiece Theater. We get into a lot of really good stuff on this one, so that is coming up here in a second. Before we get to it, of course, I got to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow us on social media at PiecingPod and join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. Aside from that, I do have a bunch of advanced episodes on the Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content from Piecing It Together, Awesome Movie Year, and from my music career. Lots of stuff over there, so check that out if you want to support the show in that way. But of course, I'm just happy to have you all out there listening as well. So thank you for being out there and listening. I will be announcing another live show soon, so keep an eye out for that. But aside from that, that's all the announcements I got for today. Let's just get into this conversation because we got a lot of puzzle pieces to get into. All right, we're going to talk about The Royal Hotel, and we've got Megan Kearns here from Spoilerpiece Theater. Megan, thanks so much for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to say, this movie, it came completely out of nowhere for me. I didn't know anything about this going in. I had seen like 3 tweets that were like, this movie is awesome. And I was like, I guess maybe I'll go see it. I hadn't seen a trailer. I didn't even know until the opening credits that it was Kitty Green.
Oh, wow.
Which I loved The Assistant a few years ago. I mean, loved is a strange word to use with that movie, but you know what I mean?
No, I love it too. I love it too. But I hear you. I know what you mean because it's an awful experience watching it.
For sure. So, once I got in, I was like, oh, wow, this is great. Great performances, great story. And so when I got home, I was like, I got to cover this one. So I'm happy you stepped up and we're down to do this. What was your experience? Because like I said, I saw nothing about this. Were you aware this was on the way?
I was.
You were. Okay.
I get a lot of press information like about films coming out, and I keep track all year long of what's coming. And I was such a fan of Kitty Green and The Assistant as well that I was like, what is she going to do next? What is she going to do next? So it was on my radar. So I did. So I was very, very eager to see it.
I got to check my junk mail messages. Maybe that's what's going on here.
No, but you're not wrong. There was, like I said, there was not a lot of buzz about it. There were not a lot of trailers. There was not a lot of information leading up to it. So it's unfortunate because it is a really, really fantastic film.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're in a weird time for movie promotion. Some movies they just come out and then they're gone. And I mean, this is still in theaters at the time that we're recording. I don't know exactly when it's going to be hitting home. We'll see how it does as it, continues its rollout. But it's just a weird time all around. But, with all that said, though, we might as well just start jumping into Royal Hotel and what we've got for puzzle pieces. What do you have for your first one?
All right. Well, so I had trouble with some of the puzzle pieces, but then also easy. So which sounds very contradictory. But the first one, I think, is probably the easiest one, which is Hotel Coolgarie, which is a 2016 documentary that Kitty Green saw and was inspired to make a fictionalized film about that experience, about 2 either Finnish or Scandinavian women who went to the Australian outback and became bartenders. And so it was the same premise, and she wanted to explore that.
Interesting. So, see, I did not even know about this. So this is a documentary, 2016.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I just brought it up, 2016. So this is like kind of a roughly based on an actual thing then.
Yes. Yeah,
that's
it says
interesting.
At the very end credits say that it's loosely based or based on actual events, but of course, things are changed.
Interesting. Okay, so now I'm going to have to seek out this documentary because that does sound like really interesting, and what a crazy experience to happen.
Right?
But I mean, Yeah, that is wild. I love that you brought that one up, and I'm
Oh,
really
good.
really interested to see that now. So great piece to kick it off with. My pieces also, they're kind of all over the place. They range from like the
Yes.
straightforward like yeah, it's a feminist film, so let's talk about some of that, but like to
Right.
also some like kind of out there about more of like the I don't know, the rawness and the tenseness of the film
Yes.
and all that.
Yes.
I'm going to start off with one of those, which
Ooh.
a little bit out there maybe, but I'm going to go with Green Room. Uh,
Yes.
the Green Room is a fantastic movie about a punk band
Yes.
who goes to play a show, and it turns out to be at this Nazi bar, and they can't escape this bar. And
Hmm.
I'm not saying that all Australian drunken, filthy miner people are like Nazis necessarily, but they're very scary. They're a scary bunch. And if you can't get away, if you're in the middle of nowhere, there's no way out, and they're all just shit faced, loaded, and
Yes.
there's no controlling them whatsoever. You could kind of see the comparison here of where Green Room and the Royal Hotel kind of leave you in that stuck, struggling around these just very scary people.
Oh, 100%. As soon as you said Green Room, I'm mad I didn't think of it because that is such a claustrophobic film. A great use of space, so tense. Yeah, no, I definitely see the comparisons, even though on the surface it seems very, very out there.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. What do you got for your next piece?
Well, I feel like I'm cheating, but we already talked about it, so I won't talk about it at length. But I feel like The Assistant, Kitty
Hmm.
Green's first narrative film, like we have to talk about that because it's also a film that is extremely subtle but extremely powerful with a riveting lead performance by Julia Garner, and it's exploring sexual harassment and sexism in the workplace and doing it in a really more subtle way than a lot of films do. And Kitty Green, in an interview with the LA Times, said that she thematically thinks of these as two linked films. So
Yeah.
going with
No,
that.
I think that makes total sense too. Like, I mean, it's not like this is a conversation we're done having, you know?
No,
And
of course
so
not.
not by a
Sadly.
long shot. And so the assistant and this being part of like an unofficial continuation, like it definitely makes sense. And
Hmm.
we've seen a lot of these kinds of feminist like kind of screams in a way, I think is the way I put it in my letterbox review, but like just like an anger about everything that's been going on. And
Yes.
the assistant is one of the best of the bunch for sure, and the Royal Hotel absolutely follows that up really well. So yeah, I think it definitely deserves a place on this list for sure, even if it's the same director. It totally fits. Um, I'm gonna go with we're on the eve of a new Scorsese film. So I'm going to go with Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Ah.
One of his best, like, non action or epic or gangster or whatever you want to say kind of movies, starring Ellen Burstyn as a woman who, along with her kid, is kind of like trying to get away and start over, and ends up working in this bar, and has to deal with the people that work at the bar, people who just kind of hang around the bar. And these two girls, like, they're on vacation, but really, and we don't get a lot of the background of like what set them on their journey to go out to Australia, but we do know that they're kind of trying to get away from it all and away from a
Yes.
lot of shit that's been going on back at home. And so the idea of this woman in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore also like just trying to get away from something and kind of starting over, and that takes her to a bar, and then that bar ends up being filled with both the good and the bad, but mostly
Hmm.
there's a lot of bad. But
Yeah,
it's all
there
kind of
is.
centers around that. So yeah, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. My next piece.
That's a great one. And so I had another one that I was going to wait, but I feel like it fits in this theme. So I'm going with it too. I also was reminded again of well, not so much a bar, but a restaurant. I was reminded of Support the Girls, the 2018 Andrew
Hmm.
Bujalski film starring Regina Hall and Lou Richardson, where they're food servers at a sports bar. And there's a lot of bros and toxic masculinity, very similar to
Sure.
this environment. But it's also even though it's a comedy, it's a very deft exploration of the kinds of insidious sexism from the customers, but also from the behind the scenes of the boss that these women face, and how Regina Hall's trying to shield the other women servers from the sexism and doesn't always succeed. And yeah, and it also features a really great scene with a primal scream, literally. So.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I actually haven't seen Support the Girls. I've heard great
It's
things
great.
about it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get to that one of these days. But everything I've heard of it and the way you just described it, I mean, it sounds like a perfect fit here. And yeah, it has the primal screen, so absolutely, great one there. I will go with It Comes at Night. I already brought up an A24 film,
Ooh.
another one. This is it's a weird one from Trey Edward Schultz. It's a horror-ish film because, quite frankly, not a lot happens in it. But it just has this constant feeling of dread whenever
Yes.
other people are around. Like human beings are the fear, they are the scariness, they are the awfulness, and that was one of the things about the Royal Hotel that I kind of liked. It was just this kind of feeling of like, God, people are the worst, aren't they? And
Yeah.
that'll kind of factor into another one of my pieces too. But they're both movies where, granted, not a lot happens from scene to scene,
Mhm.
but they're both movies where the dread is palpable, the feeling that something could happen at any moment, and it never lets up on that. And
Yes.
then when things do, hit the fan, like it's like you knew it was coming, but it's not quite the way you expected it to happen. They
Mhm.
both do a really great job of subverting that expectation of what the fear, what the scare of the situation actually is, and it's a really great, interesting movie, and I think kind of gets that same kind of vibe here.
Totally. I love that film. I think it's great, and I think Trey Edward Schultz is fantastic
Hmm.
at kind of horror level tension because Krisha, his first film,
Ooh,
is one of the
yeah,
most horrifying, intense films I've ever seen, and there is no horror in it.
yeah,
So, agreed.
absolutely, absolutely. What do you got next?
Okay, well, speaking of horror, my next film, also with very palpable tension and a great unnerving, uneasy atmosphere, is Chloe Okuno's 2022 film Watcher, starring Micah Monroe. And
Sure.
it is great. It explores a woman's unease about her environment, always looking over her shoulder, thinking she's being stalked, being gaslighted by the men
Hmm.
around her, that she's just imagining things. And yeah, it's such a really tense level of dread and atmosphere that is just superb.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. I hadn't thought of that, but that's a really good one. And yeah, all these characters, even the ones that are like kind of on these two girls' side, like Hugo Weaving's character or
Yep.
Ursula Yovich, the two that kind of run the bar, like
Mhm.
even they seem good, but you really don't know for sure. Even Toby
Right.
Wallace is like nice but threatening, like at the same time, like it's really, there's just a constant unease of just not knowing anything. Like there's no way to be sure about anyone. And so, yeah, Watcher definitely gets into that as well. So that's a great one to include there.
Thank you.
Um, I might as well get my other negative one out of the way. And I'm going to go with Darren Aronofsky's Mother,
Oh,
which,
yes!
one of my favorite movies of the last 10 years. Now,
Me
don't get me wrong.
too!
Oh, it's so good. It's so
So
freaking good.
good.
The Royal Hotel is no doubt a feminist film, like no question. But it's also, like I was saying, like it's people are kind of just scary. People are, like, if you don't know them, you don't want them around. You don't want them in your house. You don't want them in the place where you live. It doesn't matter who they are, and nothing captures that quite like Mother. The idea of all these people just like coming and going as they please and just how icky that is. And these girls, they
Yes.
live in this bar and they really kind of can't help that these guys show up drunk and start banging on the door. Like that's where they go to drink. It's like the only place for miles. Like they're just constantly in and out. Also, you have like the kind of, the structure of the story of like the rise and fall of like it's nighttime, so everyone is in your home, basically their
Yes.
home. It's the bar. So everyone's in there making a ruckus. They're drunk, they're awful, they're loud, they're gross, and then they're gone. And it's just quietness and stillness. And then they're back and it's grossness and disgusting again. Very much like Mother, all that rowdiness and ickiness, and yeah, it's just no movie captures that so well as Mother does, but this one is kind of in that same vein for sure.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought up Mother because I don't think Mother is talked about enough. And I actually think Mother is a very interesting feminist film as well in
Hmm.
its own right. But yeah, oh, such a great film. Great, great
Yeah.
pick. Unconventional pick, but great one.
Mother is one of those movies that's packed with so many different like readings, and I think you can go
Yes,
full on feminist with it. You can go,
totally.
of course, the religion aspects, but
Yep.
like there's other ways too. And yeah, that it's the best. It's a great movie. And yeah, what do you have for your next pick?
Okay, my next pick is this is one of my favorite films of the past few years is Julian Higgins's God's Country starring Tandy Way Newton that came out in 2022. And I think this is a career best performance from Tandy Way Newton and it's a neo-western. She is a professor who has gone to her mother's home after her mother passes away and so the film explores grief, but it also explores her tension with these two guys who want to hunt near her land and they want to walk on her land to get to the hunting grounds. And she says, no, you can't. And such a simple exchange, simple gesture, just it's a slow burn and just ignites a volatile blend of sexism and racism. And it's just, but this is such a nail biting film but it's so subtle and so restrained and it reminded me of a lot of the restraint that's happening in the Royal Hotel that you don't know what's going to happen in certain situations you can kind of read as like, oh no, that's menacing, but is it like, and
Right.
it's you start to question yourself, and this God's Country very much has scenes like that too, like, oh, are they threatening her? Maybe not, maybe they
Yeah.
are, like, so yeah, very much similar themes.
Yeah, there's a lot of culture clash here as well. So it's like,
Yes.
are they just having a laugh, these guys? You know, like it's really
Right,
hard to say. And
right.
yeah, it's uncomfortable as hell no matter what, but it's really hard to tell what is and what isn't an outright threat. And so that again adds to that whole constant dread of just really not knowing what could possibly go down at any moment. So yeah, great
Absolutely.
one for sure. I
Thank
love
you.
that. I'm gonna go with Quentin Tarantino's Death Proof. Um,
Ah!
a couple of girls in a bar. There's a lot of really fun dialogue between them
Mhm.
and the other people at the bar, and you just know violence is on its way at any moment. There's just
Oh,
no way it
yes.
wouldn't happen. There's got to be violence eventually, and Tarantino definitely takes his time getting to it with Death Proof, but
Mhm.
here it's also kind of it's a slow burn, and it's more about that setting and kind of keeping that level of heightened, your attention to everything that could possibly be happening. You just mentioned it with God's Country as well. There's always something that could be the thing that's going to pop off, and
Yes.
you never are quite sure what it is. And Death Proof is another great example of a movie that does that really well.
I agree. Death Proof is great. And that's so funny because one of my picks was also a Tarantino film, but a different Tarantino
Okay.
film. Yeah, I went with The Hateful Eight because
Okay.
you're trapped. It's a Western and
Yeah.
very much the Royal Hotel, very because of the outback setting gave me kind of Western vibes and kind of the two young women against the town essentially, kind of unofficially. But yeah, being trapped in a bar setting with a bunch of murderers and you don't know what's going to happen, it very much kind of gave me the same vibes. But I think Death Proof I think that's a better pick.
Hey,
But it is
I
funny that
like
we both saw that.
Yeah, well, I like the Hateful Eight as an example too. I mean,
Oh,
it
good.
it really works. That setting
Mhm.
is absolutely like, there's no getting out of there. They're
Right.
just gonna have to wait, and
Mhm.
they're gonna have to deal with it. So it's
Exactly.
it's exactly that. So yeah, great one.
Oh, thanks.
I will go with so I have a couple others, but they all kind of deal with the same thing. So I think I'm going to combine them and make it my last puzzle piece because they all deal with that taking a job in the middle of nowhere
Mhm.
and knowing it's going to be shitty, but it's even worse than like kind of what you expected. And so I'm going to go with The Shining,
Ooh,
also
yes.
Alien, and
Yes.
also The Thing. Just throw them all in there together. Three movies, completely different genres, but movies that, you're stuck, you're on a job, You
Yep.
probably shouldn't have taken that job, but you did anyway, and now there's no getting out of it. You gotta wait until it's over, even though it's going to be a bad time for everyone involved. This is kind of the thing that makes The Royal Hotel a fun movie, even though it's dark, it's dealing with very heavy subject matter, it's threatening in a way. Like
Hmm.
it makes it fun because these kind of genre aspects of it are always kind of a fun thing to deal with in movies. Anytime you're dealing with people stuck in a situation they kind of can't get out of, it tends to lead to a movie that is intense and that you're just kind of on the edge of your seat for the whole time. And those three movies are really great examples of that.
Totally. The Thing was one of my puzzle pieces too. So I love
Nice.
because of the isolation, because of not being able to trust anyone. Yeah, no, totally. That I completely agree with. But all three of those are great picks. Those are all great.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So you had The Thing on your list. Do you have any others that you wanted to bring up?
Oh my God, I do. I actually have a lot.
Okay.
I
Let's
went
let's do
brainstorm
'em.
wild.
Nice.
So yes, I do have other ones. Speaking of genre, I also have 10 Cloverfield Lane,
Ooh, yeah.
the 2016 sci-fi film, because again, it's focusing on a woman who's trapped and confined, and Mary Elizabeth Winstead with John Goodman, and John Goodman kind of seems helpful and seems nice at
Sure.
first, even though he's weird and creepy. And yeah, but there's still that level of unease throughout the entire film that's just very palpable. So yeah, I very much was thinking of that film.
10 Cloverfield Lane is one of my favorite movies of the last 10 years, but this is the second time in a row a guest brought it up and I didn't think of it on No One Will Save You. My guest brought it
Yes.
up. So I'm like,
Yes.
man, I'm slipping. I need to think of that. Maybe I need to rewatch it soon.
I know, right? I don't know why, but that's a movie that sticks with me and I think about quite frequently. So
So good. So good.
so good, so good. And then there's some other films that Kitty Green, again in this LA Times article, talked about, because she talked about the horror elements and how she wanted to subvert genre conventions, because she doesn't want to ever do a straight horror, which I think is a shame, because I think she would be excellent as a horror director. But if she keeps
Yeah.
inverting and infusing her films with horror elements, I'm okay with that.
Sure.
But she talked about her inspirations, and she talked about the 1971 Australian new wave film Wake in Fright, about a school teacher who's stranded in the outback in Australia. She also talked about Wolf Creek, another Australian horror
Yeah.
film, about backpackers taken captive by a sadistic killer.
I
And
thought
then
about that one, but
Oh,
I've
you
never
did?
actually seen it. But
Yeah,
so
I
that's why I
haven't
didn't put it
either.
down. Yeah.
That's totally fair. I haven't either. But then I was like, oh, I need to see these.
Yeah.
She's creating a watch list here. And then she also talked about Straw Dogs, but she
Sure.
didn't want to show the graphic violence and rape that film does. But she was inspired by that kind of mounting tension and being harassed and so on. So
Yeah.
and then she also talked about Thelma and Louise, and which I
Oh,
think is
sure.
yeah, right? Like I was like, "Oh my God, I didn't even think of that." And
Yeah.
that's such a great, women buddy road trip film, but also really deftly explores women's agency and sexism and rape culture in a really great way.
That could be a great inspiration for the Royal Hotel too, as they're making their way out of
I know, right? Oh, that ending. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then and of course I thought of bartending movies. Not that they really fit, but I did think of like Cocktail and Roadhouse.
Sure.
But then I would say my last piece is also very similar to Support the Girls, but in a very different way. The stoner comedy. It's Augustine Frizzell's Never Going Back, which is
Ooh,
a film
yeah.
I really, really enjoy, about two best friends who are servers, and hijinks ensue as they're trying to make their way to a Galveston beach vacation. And it just kind of reminded me in a very different way. Like if you took that same film but put it in the Royal Hotel, like they're kind of two pieces, but one is like, oh, look at this wacky thing that happened. Isn't that
Yeah.
silly and wild? And then you look at the Royal Hotel and it's like, oh my God, I don't know if I can handle this tension that I'm
Yeah.
feeling. It's so anxiety inducing.
Oh my God, yeah. The girls in Never Going Back, they wouldn't even notice what's going on, at
No.
that point. They would just be like, "Huh, this is cool, I guess."
Yeah,
Whatever.
right.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's
I
so
love
much
that
fun.
film. Yeah.
Well, I will read down our list of all the puzzle pieces we just talked about, and then we'll get into some closing thoughts here. We talked about Hotel Coolgarie, Green Room, The Assistant, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, Support the Girls, It Comes at Night, Watcher, Mother, God's Country, Death Proof, The Hateful Eight, Alien, The Thing, The Shining, 10 Cloverfield Lane, Wake and Fright, Wolf Creek, Straw Dogs, Thelma and Louise, Cocktail, and Roadhouse, and Never Going Back. Lots and lots of great stuff from, feminist things, of course, but also just very tense movies about people stuck in locations that are kind of remote and creepy. There's a lot of different things going on there, and it really, I think really makes for some interesting pieces here. Are there any closing thoughts? Anything we didn't quite get into that you wanted to mention?
Just that this is such an excellent film, and I really hope more people see it. I mean, the performances are so good. Julia Garner I know so many people know her from Ozark and her very kind of over-the-top performance, which I love her as Ruth. She's great. But
Yeah.
I love seeing her in much more subtle and restrained performances. And this very much is that. Like, just watching her facial expressions and her body language, she is so clearly rigid and uncomfortable right from the start and without even saying a word. But I also think Jessica Henwick is really great too. And the way they handle the difficulties is really fascinating, that Jessica Henwick kind of wants to, be like, no, it's fine, and brush it off and just have fun. Whereas Julia Garner is like, no, we need to get the hell out of here. Like, no,
Yeah.
we can't put up with this. But I think this is such a sharply crafted film. I think it's so taut, so well paced. And I think it's just a really fascinating film that really delves into, unfortunately, a lot of everyday situations that women and non-binary people face, but isn't often talked about or is kind of brushed under the rug. Like, oh, it's just guys being guys or whatever. And so I think that there's a lot of deep things that this film is talking about and examining, but in a really, really riveting and captivating way. I love this film so much. I think it's spectacular.
Absolutely. I'll just add to what you were just saying about the difference in the way Julia Garner and Jessica Henwick's characters like kind of relate to the situation they've gotten themselves into here. Obviously there's a wide spectrum of ways that somebody would, deal with these situations, but showing two very different versions of that in the same film this way, and it like fits really well that one of them would kind of react one way, one of them would react the other way, and the only reason they're able to survive is because they do have each other, because otherwise it would
Yes.
just be too much. Like it's really cool. And then also I would mention all those supporting characters, Hugo Weaving, I mentioned already, Toby, Wallace, like they all give those performances that seem on the surface just like, I don't know, drunk people, basically drunk Outback people, but like it adds to that whole thing of just not knowing what the hell, just disorienting weirdness of this
Yes.
situation. And so yeah, lots of great performances all around. Great movie. I think that does it for the Royal Hotel. Is there another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Oh, goodness. There's so many good ones. Well, I just came off of seeing Killers of the Flower Moon, so I would recommend that because that is an incredible film with an amazing, riveting performance by Lily Gladstone, who is just phenomenal. So I would say that film.
I can't wait. I am so excited to see it. And yeah, absolutely. Megan, tell people where they can find you and the podcast.
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter at OpinionSWorld, also on Instagram and Letterboxd at The Opinion S. You can find me at Spoilerpiece Theater. I host that weekly, spoilerpiece.com and at Spoilerpiece at all of our social media platforms. And I'm also the co-host of the limited series podcast, The Slashers. You can find me there too.
Awesome. Well, Megan, thank you so much for coming back on the show, and maybe we'll get you back again sometime.
I would love that. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm Josh Bell.
And I'm Jason Harris, and we co-host a podcast called Awesome Movie Year.
Each season, we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year.
We deep dive into these specific years, and we pick out why they were such great years for films. We go over the biggest hits, the biggest flops, the best picture, some personal picks, some cult classics.
Years we've covered in past seasons include 1994, 2003, 1977, and 1984, and we've got all of film history to look forward to. So check us out at awesomemovieyear.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about the Royal Hotel. Thank you to Megan Kearns for joining me on that one, and thank you to all of you for listening. Of course, I got to remind you again that if you are not already subscribed to Piecing It Together, make sure you're subscribed so you'll find out about all the new episodes as they come out. And while you're at it, if you're enjoying the show, make sure to drop a little 5-star rating and review. It would be very helpful and I would really appreciate it. You could also share the show, follow us on social media at Piecing Pod, join my Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces. Check out the Patreon. I told you about it at the top of the show. Lots of stuff to check out. I'm also going to really be building up my mailing list in the coming weeks and months. I have a lot I want to do with that. So you could check that out as well. And yeah, otherwise, just thank you for being out there listening. I'm still loving doing the show, and we've got more live shows on the way, a lot of really fun special episodes on the way, lots of really cool stuff. So thank you for being out there. Let's close this out with a piece of music like I always do. And, the Royal Hotel being a very tense, claustrophobic film, I'm going to go with a piece from the film score that I just released, just in time for the Halloween season. It's a horror film called Blind Malice, and this is a score I composed last year, and I'm really happy to release this one. It's, I think, also gets into a lot of that really tense, claustrophobic vibes, and just, a perfect little addition for your Halloween playlists. But I'm going to play a track from this score. It's called Never Saw It Coming, and I hope you enjoy it. Make sure to add this to your Halloween playlists, everybody. We'll be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
an All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.